twilight lies gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars.
Hi, and welcome to my show. I'm Susan Smith, and this is where I give conservative views on local and national issues. We have an exciting guest today. Her name is Pat Loontjer. She's with Gambling with the Good Life, and we're going to get to interviewing Pat just as soon as I do a couple of announcements, so get your pens and paper ready. The first one is a subject I'm going to talk about on a later show, but Virgil Patlin, South Omaha Latino police officer. He's with the Latino Peace Officers Association, is running for city council, and he is pro-amnesty. In fact, so much that if you remember the Swift raids, he agreed and came out publicly applauding the efforts of the Grand Island police chief for not assisting ICE with those raids. So we're going to be talking more about Virgil as time goes along, but what I have a problem with is why Virgil Patlin is looking for conservative Republican support when he is indeed pro-amnesty. And his oath to uphold the law, I guess, applies to everybody but illegal aliens. So we're going to be looking a little bit more at that. The follow-up on the La Raza, the anti-white, anti-American course that was being taught in Arizona public schools. I told you I would check into Omaha public schools to make sure it wasn't being taught here. And Mr. Barry Thomas, the supervisor of social studies at the TAC building, did get back in touch with me, and I appreciate it very much. But he gave me this textbook. It's a supplemental, which teachers are not required. It's approved material for the course, but they are not required to teach from it. And it's called Mexican American History by Carlos Jimenez. That's Jimenez. And I have been invited to attend one of the classes at one of the schools, and I am going to take him up on that too. So again, I appreciate you getting back to me, Mr. Thomas, and I'll report back what I find out after I go through the materials. Now, the last thing is the unicameral update. This is great, and it's offered free to the citizens. It's a unicameral update. You get it weekly in the mail. It lists all the bills that have been introduced, who introduced them. It features stories on certain senators' priority bills. And so anything that you want to know about the unicameral, you want to make sure you subscribe to this. And you do that by calling 402-471-2788. And they will put you on the mailing list. So I hope you get that. All right, so let's get started with Pat. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you so much.
Well, tell us about Gambling with the Good Life, which is your organization, how it got started, what kind of bills you look at, and so on.
Gambling with the Good Life is a grassroots organization that's opposed to expanded gambling in the state of Nebraska. And we were formed in 1995, so we've been doing this for 18 years successfully. There's been no expanded gambling since we were formed.
Good job.
And that's quite a feat, because really we're up against the biggest gorilla there is. I mean, there's more money in the gambling industry than almost any other opposition you could look for. And yet we've been successful. We've brought the truth to the voters twice, and they've agreed that enough is enough. What we have here, we've never opposed. It's not that we agree with the gambling that exists right now, but once something is in, it's almost impossible to roll it back. So we kind of got ahead of the slot machines and the casinos and said enough is enough, no more. And it started in 1995. I was a stay-at-home mom with 5 kids, and I was approached by Senator Jim Jensen, who was a new senator at the time. And this was in November, and we had met at some functions, and he called me up one day and said, would you come over to my house and talk to my wife and I? And he said, I'm very concerned about what's happening in the legislature. He said they had adjourned the previous May, and he said that the Las Vegas, Nevada lobbyists had come in and tried to push forth a bill to bring slot machines and casinos to Nebraska. And he said it only lost by a few votes. And he said, I'm sure they're coming back in January, which was just a few months away. And he said the thing that bothered him the most was that there was no opposition. And he said, I've studied this issue. I know what it's going to do to our families and our communities, and it's bad. Would you help and get a group organized and maybe just come down and testify? And he said, I'll help you with sending out letters or whatever you need. So I'm thinking, okay, it's Christmas season, and that's a really bad time to try to do any politicking. But it's only a couple-month commitment. So I did, and we sent out letters to every church in the state of Nebraska telling them what was coming, asking them to contact their senators. And then when the legislature reconvened in January, we went down and we testified, just a few of us. We'd never done this before. I don't even know if I'd ever been in the Capitol before, but we were scared. We were up all night writing our notes, and went down and appeared before the committee, and they took the vote the 1st of February, and when the lights went up on that board and we were down there, I don't know who was more shocked, us or the lobbyists that were proposing this, because we beat them 36-9.
Beautiful.
And a reporter went over and talked to the chief lobbyist, who is still down there, by the way, and said, well, what are you going to do now? And he looked up at the board and he said, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I hardly have enough for a ball team. And I'm thinking, oh, great, that was really fun. It was a good experience. I'm going to go back, raise my kids. But I did not know I was signing up for a lifetime, because they never give up. The gambling industry is greed-driven, and they never give up. So when they couldn't pass the bill through the legislature, they went to the petition process and, tried to get it on the ballot. We're very fortunate in the state of Nebraska, as opposed to most other states. We are protected by Constitution against slot machines. So in order to change the Constitution, it has to be a vote of the people. The only way to get something on a ballot is through the legislature, which is what they always try first, or the petition process. And twice they've managed to get on the ballot, and we've beat them badly both times. And it was because good people like Nancy and Tom Osborne and Pete Ricketts and even Warren Buffett, and people that really care about this state. Nancy and I traveled the whole state in a rented van, going city by city, holding meetings, giving out flyers and yard signs, and it was truly grassroots, because we do not have the money that the $1 million check that the Nevada writes.
That is absolutely amazing. Girls, do you see what you can do out there? The power is with the women. When you want to get something done, you get a mom out there. She will accomplish it. Well, now, what are the trickle-down problems associated with gambling?
Well, we get calls all the time from people who, whether it's lottery, or whether it's Keno, or whether it's going across to the boats, and these are families that are being devastated. And all of those costs, from the divorce, from the embezzlements, and from just the crime that causes this when it becomes an addiction, it all trickles down to us. And some people will say, well, this is a crime that it's not a crime, it's just a hobby, and why can't people have the freedom to do what they want? Well, they can. When it becomes an addiction, it overflows to those of us who never go to the boats or never buy a ticket.
Good point.
The statistics nationwide will show, and these are not my statistics, but they're national statistics, that for every $1 state gains in gambling revenue, it's going to cost them $3 minimum in social costs. Because with the divorces, with the embezzlements, with the all of those conditions, it all comes back on the taxpayers. We're going to pick that up. And so it used to be called a vice. It used to be called gambling. And it was right in the same thing with drug abuse and alcoholism and all the rest.
Right.
Now they call it gaming.
Yes.
And they've given it this glorious, nobody wins. The only ones that win are the owners. If you're sitting in the slot machine and you happen to win the jackpot, you did not beat the house. It came out of your neighbor who was sitting next to you, because the house always takes their cut first. When you slide your dollar in there, it takes their percentage off, and the rest goes into the pot. But they never lose. You're never beating the house. And if you sit there long enough, you'll lose every cent.
Okay. So now, what do you say to the people or the citizens who think that we are missing out on funds because Nebraskans are going right across the river to game, see, to gamble, and, instead of staying here in our state.
Well, I try to equate it to if, I wish it wasn't in Council Bluffs. Of course, the gambling industry built Council Bluffs for us, for Omaha. They always build on the borders of a state when they take them in. And by the way, when they first came into Iowa, they sold Iowa on the idea that they were going to have 2 riverboats, and they were going to cruise up and down the Missouri. They were going to have a limit on the number of bettings. They were going to have a limit on the losses. They were going to cruise for X number of hours, and they were going to bring tourism to Iowa. The boats no longer float. They now have 21 full-blown casinos and one of the highest bankruptcy rates in the nation. And I wish they weren't there. My solution would be to take the bridge out, because I thought if they had to swim to go gamble, they probably wouldn't go as often. But no one's picked up on that. So it is there, and I wish it wasn't, and Omaha is the most affected. But if your garage was on fire, would you pour gasoline on your house?
No.
And that's exactly what we would do if we changed our Constitution. Because what's happening in Omaha now with the location, and the prevalence of the availability to gamble in the casinos, it would spread all across the whole state.
Oh, I agree. It's a creeping. Once they've got their, because people have said that to me about illegal immigration. Well, what's wrong with this little thing? Or because it's the same thing. Once they got the foot in the door, it goes like wildfire. And I had no idea the Council Bluffs had 20, how many did you say?
The state of Iowa has 21. The state of Iowa
has 21 full-blown casinos. And they have, you said they have the largest bankruptcy rate.
They have one of the largest in the whole country.
Oh, my goodness.
And their budget usually is much worse than ours. But that's what happens with the 2 little, just give us 2 boats, we'll cruise.
Right.
It's the camel's nose under the tent. Once they get in there, they'll take over the whole state. And then, because of the money that's involved, they'll own the politicians.
Right.
And trying to get anything out after something like that is in. So I'm so grateful for 18 years, that God has blessed us and kept them out.
Yeah, well, thanks to your hard work and many of those who support you, who go out to the unicameral, who testify, send their emails, make their calls. Because interesting, I had a question. How much of that money, because there's always some kind of an agreement with the city, isn't there, that the casinos put so much back into the community? Do you know if that's being upheld?
Well, I believe it is, and from what I understand, it's negotiated with each city and each community. Council Bluffs is really unique because when they negotiated their contract back in the early 90s, they put in agreement that they would have to give a very small percentage, but it would go into a fund, and that fund would then be used for community betterment. So now what we see is it's like Santa Claus. They've got this pile of money every year, and they give big donations to various good charities. But that can never be duplicated. That was grandfathered into there, and it won't happen. Anything that we change in Nebraska, and if there were any percentage going to the city or the state, it would go into the general funds. Well, anything that goes into the general fund seems to get lost.